Hey everyone, this is Jessie from Group 2 with Danielle Banton and Lisa Fry here to introduce our mobile and smartwatch app called Unicycle. So just to give you a brief recap, our design provides kind of a one-stop shop for cyclists to plan a trip. We provide maps on the go, GPS for route tracking, connecting with friends, and tracking historical data, as well as some additional resources noted here. So as I just mentioned, our goal was to just provide a central repository of information for cyclists on the go. We developed prototypes for mobile and smartwatch interfaces that are task focused and allow for swipe functionality, specifically because we wanted to ensure that users had the option to access information while they were stopped or actively riding on their smartwatch. So in regards to our design process, we obviously spent a lot of time sketching and brainstorming, iterating and testing. And I'm sure if we had more time, we would probably complete a few more cycles of this. Not going to touch on the design principles in this video, but feel free to take a look after. In terms of the competitive analysis, when we were developing kind of our initial ideas about possible prototyping directions, we conducted a competitive analysis just to better understand what existing apps offer and what we could provide that was a little bit different. What we noticed is that a lot of the apps on the market are focused on fitness. And while we obviously think it's important to provide users with kind of holistic riding data, we placed a little bit more emphasis on the process of actually selecting trails, tracking, and then the overall process while actively riding. So here's our mood board. We wanted to just provide kind of a simple, concise interface with cool earth tones and some pops of color. Again, this is similarly for the interface of the smartwatch. It was really just meant to be a simpler version of the app while kind of allowing the cyclist to quickly glance at their watch to get the information that they need. Again, the persona was a guy named Zach. We've covered this in a previous video, so I'm not going to discuss it in great detail today. Same thing with our scenario. Moving on to the design charrette, you can see there was a fair amount of overlap in the ideas that our group came up with, which was kind of cool to see and made alignment on our prototyping a little bit easier. Now diving into a brief overview of our kind of prototype evolution. Obviously, we started out with a kind of laundry list of ideas that we wanted to include in our app. So first, taking a look at kind of the home screen and the iterations that we made from lo-fi to hi-fi. After logging in, we personalized the home screen a bit by just welcoming the user. We really wanted the home screen to provide just a high-level navigation to allow the user to really easily access kind of what was most essential to them. Well, we had, like I said, a laundry list of items to include. In our initial prototype, we realized that a simpler, more kind of streamlined interface would be better for the user, and considering Unicycle is intended to be used on the go. And then last thing to note here is just the user testing indicated that we needed to provide kind of easier accessibility to weather information. So we ended up adding that weather feature on the hi-fi prototype. And again, just to simplify the interface, we included all the kind of only the essential buttons and just simplify the navigation bar on the bottom, again, just for the hi-fi prototype. Moving on to the find a route, which was one of our tasks for our scenarios during testing. Like I mentioned, we started when we started with a starting point and an ending point. And then through the iterations, we kind of made changes, as you can see here. We initially started with the weather on the home screen and then had the user select various filters. What we realized during testing is that the filters were not super intuitive. The caret drop down wasn't very intuitive. And then we had a lot of confusion surrounding kind of the views and what they meant, and how to actually access them and kind of get going. So for the final prototype, the hi-fi prototype, we just simplified the filters. We reduced the number of screens and map views, which we had for the views themselves. And then we added friends tracking to the beginning of the process, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Moving on, here's the tracking feature. So like I was just mentioning, one of the main features that we wanted to showcase was the ability to track your friends, assuming that a lot of times you're cycling with other people. So obviously on the mid-fight prototype, we had kind of a series of steps that users had to go through in order to add their friends. The plus button and just the whole process of adding friends was not that intuitive. We had just a stop button down here that also kind of led to some confusion, and there were just really too many steps involved. And once you selected friends, they weren't necessarily popping up on the actual prototype. So once we completed the hi-fi prototype, we adjusted kind of the process at which you select a trail. You can then click this drop down here, and that will give you access to the filters. We put the track friends kind of earlier in the process because that made a little bit more sense from the feedback that we got. And then once you actually start the trip, you can see all of your friends on the trail, just to kind of know that that change has been made. And then one of our final scenarios was camping. So again, camping feature, it began just by having the weather on the home screen. You could then search for nearby camping locations. This map was a hotspot location where you could essentially click on a certain campsite and be taken to a separate page with a little bit more information. And then again, we had access to some filters. A lot of the feedback that came back to just how intuitive it was. A lot of our users suggested having just easier access to the information that they might need. They wanted to have access to just some general campsites. They also wanted to be able to see the star rating for the campsite. And then this map down below allows them to double click, and we have some instructions when they're actually using the app to provide, again, additional information about the actual campsite. Once they've made their selection, they're then taken to another page where they have more detailed information, where they can access the actual campsite's website and go forth with that. Digital narrative, again, this is something that we've covered previously, so I'm not going to touch on this in great detail. For our usability testing for the mid-fight prototype, we took our users through 3 scenarios. So during the first scenario, we had our users kind of imagine that they were cycling in Lake Tahoe and they needed to find a place to camp for the night. The second scenario asked users to plan a cycling trip. And then the third asked users to track their friend's location. So again, just going through the tasks that we had our users complete. And again, I kind of touched on some of the main findings when I was going through some of the iterations that we made, but a lot of it just came back to some of the filters, creating an interface that was more intuitive and a lot more simplified. So that's really how we transition from the sketches to the mid-fi to the hi-fi. If we did have more time, I'm sure that we would do more iterations. Again, just to cover a little bit more in terms of the style and the colors and the topography that we were going for, this provides a brief overview of that. Same thing with the style guide in greater detail. We started with square buttons, and then we changed the icons and the buttons to being round. Since we're a unicycle app, we wanted to kind of reflect that in some of the buttons as well. And here is our branding and marketing for a little bit more information. And then again, just kind of a high level bird's eye view of what our full mobile app looks like from start to finish. Again, just wanted to provide a really simple interface for easy usability, especially considering we are an on-the-go type app. And last but not least, this is what our hi-fi prototype looks like for the smartwatch. So again, we've taken kind of the tasks that you would complete on the app with the intention of just simplifying them and really making them direct and to the point. Again, you can choose a trail, you can start the actual directions, you can track your friends, stop the recording of the trip, and then you can view your holistic information of the past trips that you've taken. Those are our reflections, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.